Ken, I think a lot of people these days feel like almost everything that we're hearing in the news and even from formerly trusted podcasters is just fake. And you've got a story out recently on your Substack that possibly the Trump assassination plots, people saying that Iran is trying to assassinate Trump, could be fake. You, of course, are an expert on the Trump assassination plots. You've written the great book about what the investigations missed and why it matters. What have you got for us today?
Yeah, well, thanks for the plug for the book. And actually, I've got a whole chapter devoted to debunking the Iranian conspiracies. It's chapter 5, an FBI Iranian plot to kill Trump, because most of the Iran stuff in 2024 involved these sting operations where they let in the guy that was actually arrested the day before Butler, which is interesting. And then that case gets announced like a month later, and everybody automatically assumes it's linked. But it turns out that when you looked at the details, they let him in the country on purpose. They ran an FBI informant at him. The FBI informant introduced him to two undercover agents who were posing hitmen, and they kind of just manufactured this plot. There are interesting angles. I mean, like Joe Kent, the former director of counterterrorism at the ODNI, told us when we interviewed him about a month ago that he asked the FBI if there were any links between that sting operation and what happened at Butler. He specifically wanted to know if the informants might have been in touch with Thomas Crooks, which I think is a legitimate question. But that's just like a little bit of the backstory and the history of, Iran's supposed attempts to kill Trump. This latest thing we actually touched on last week on your paid subscribers portion of our show. We were just kind of going through the news. I think it broke that day where this crazy story about how last month Trump was leaving Turkey to go to the UK. And instead of taking his Qatari jet, they had him take Air Force One, like an older model, because the Air Force One had more advanced missile defense systems and things like that. And then the story got even wilder, where it turned out he didn't even take the older version of Air Force One. He was smuggled off in a catering truck to a military jet while while the reporters and like everybody else, his staff still stayed on Air Force One and essentially served as decoys while he was secretly flying to the UK on a military jet. So we discussed that last week, and it's since emerged that this plot really looks like, a psyop on Trump to get him to restart the war. I think the Middle East Eye, which is a Middle Eastern publication, initially reported that Turkish officials, where this supposedly all went down, they were skeptical of the intelligence and they said it came from Israel. And this was designed to derail the diplomacy. And you could view the Middle East Eye with skepticism, but the Washington Post, which is basically the CIA's mouthpiece, they've since corroborated that report, quoting unnamed CIA officials who say, yes, this intelligence came from Israel. It was viewed with low confidence, and it was probably designed to derail diplomacy. And the New York Times had a similar story as well. And then if you look at the date this actually happened was July 8th, the exact same day that Trump tore up the memorandum of understanding with Iran and resumed a hot war. So it really looks like this was a psyop on Trump that, has us back in the quagmire.
Wow. I've seen this Middle East eye before, Ken. It's interesting. Turkey suspects Israel fabricated Trump Air Force One assassination plot to derail U.S.-Iran deal. Now, you brought up Joe Kent, and he was very much against the war in Iran. He also said, I believe, has said historically that Israel was feeding bad intelligence to Trump. It's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, keep in mind to go back to the first case, the guy who was arrested before Butler, that case actually stemmed from Israeli intelligence as well, where they passed along information about this guy to the US, and then the US, the FBI sets up this sting operation. So, it's been at least two times, probably a couple more, where Israel is telling Trump that Iran's trying to kill him. And it seems like Trump's trying, or he really believes it. Because remember when the US killed the Ayatollah in February, Trump said, I got him before he got me. Uh, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth held a press conference where he said he announced that Israel had killed the leader of the assassination squad, like the guy in charge of Iranian special operations, their intelligence division. He announced that they killed him, and he said Trump got the last laugh. So they seem to view this as legitimate, even though, now we're seeing in like the Washington Post that the CIA viewed it with low confidence. Of course, we don't have any arrests. If if there were Iranians in Turkey or Iranian proxies who are going to shoot down Trump's jet with missiles, Turkey's a NATO ally. This isn't Iraq. There would have been arrests made or at least some sort of documentation or more evidence than just this, bare assertions.
It's really unbelievable, Ken. I mean, it's so hard to make heads or tails of this. What do we know about the relationship between the FBI and Israel? The FBI's own website says they have long lasting relationships that are key to building cases.
Well, the FBI has always had a relationship with Israel for domestic counterterrorism via the ADL. I mean, this goes back to Hoover, where I think it was in the 60s or 70s, he ordered all the field offices to establish relationships with the ADL. For intelligence on the Ku Klux Klan and things like that. We know these FBI agents have been sent to Israel for training. The FBI obviously has a field office there. There are people in the IDF embedded in that field office, and it seems like the relationship has gotten tighter. Under Cash Patel and Dan Bongino, who, there's clips of them saying, Israel's their top priority and so on.
Yeah,
So,
that was really disturbing. The United States should be the top priority. And also,
yeah.
Dan Bongino looked to be sweating pretty hard when anybody asked him anything about Epstein. He's like, trust me, bro, I've seen, you don't want to know. And then went back to podcasting. Now he's crapping on Brandon Straka about January 6th. Dan Bongino is an utter disgrace, in my opinion. So, I don't know. This is really difficult to reconcile. So Hoover established the relationship between the FBI and the ADL. I think a lot of people probably didn't know that.
Yeah, he was initially resistant to it and then but opened up by either the 60s or right before he left in the 70s. Uh he there's FBI records out there that where he's directing all the field offices to set up relationships where they're doing these type of things similar to what we see with the SPLC case where the ADL has a network of informants who are kind of spying on these right wing extremist groups or sometimes left wing extremist groups and giving that intelligence to the FBI because, of course, groups like SPLC and the ADL have more leeway. They're not bound by the Constitution and like Attorney General's guidelines.
Hmm. Now, here's an article from The Guardian. I mean, again, we just don't know first of all, who runs these various news outlets, what their agenda is. This is from 10 months ago. It says the FBI cuts ties with two advocacy groups that track U.S. extremism after a right-wing backlash. And this is saying that both the SPLC and the ADL, that he's cutting ties with them.
Well, we can be sure that they cut ties with the SPLC because you know, they've indicted the SPLC. They're going after them in court. The ADL, I wouldn't be so sure of. After Cash Patel made that announcement last year, they made a case against these left-wing Antifa guys, a group called the Turtle Island Liberation Front, for planning to bomb businesses on New Year's Eve. And that was another case where it was like three defendants and then three undercover FBI agents and an informant, another manufactured case. But after the FBI announced that, the ADL, I think it was Jonathan Greenblatt, was at some event and he's speaking, and he just said the ADL provided intelligence to the FBI about this Turtle Island group. So it seems like I would wager that they still got a pretty tight relationship.
Now, wait a minute. Didn't you and I discuss the Turtle Island Liberation Front with this whole bombing the New York Stock Exchange?
Last week, yeah, we discussed that last week as well, but not in the context of the ADL was involved in this as well.
Did you ever see the South Park episode where Cartman dresses up as a robot to fool Butters and then he gets hired to
Yeah,
start writing scripts? It's almost like
yeah.
that's what the FBI is doing. He's like, there's something called the Turtle Island Liberation Front, and they're like really dangerous and stuff. And it's ridiculous what they come up with, right?
Yeah, my robot friend. Yeah,
Osimo 4000.
yeah. And I think we pointed out like all these groups have front in the name. It's almost like the FBI thinks they're being cute or something.
But that's what I mean. It's like every movie is Adam Sandler falls in love with a German Shepherd, and we'll call it puppy love. They just aren't that creative, you know? So I don't know. This just sort of reeks of being completely fake and stupid. And yet, here we are, gigantic war with Iran. We've got the Strait of Hormuz closed. We've even heard rumors of potential nuclear action. I mean, this is like world moving stuff. I know when I go shopping, everything is going up and up and up. Billions of dollars being spent on these things. To what end, Ken? What is the, I mean, I'm asking you an impossible question here, but what do you make of all this?
Yeah, yeah, you'd have to ask Donald Trump. It's so unfortunate. It's just like his first administration would have been lackluster, but a little bit action on deregulation, immigration enforcement, and then COVID happens, and then he does Operation Warp Speed. He pretty much puts Fauci in charge of everything, and that was a huge like black spot that ruined what he had a good thing going. Similar with this administration, it started off, I thought, pretty well. A lot of shutting down U.S. aid, firing a lot of bureaucrats, securing the border, and just a total unforced error now, just starting the Iran war. It's unfortunate. I have no idea because they've made several excuses. Iran can't have a bomb. Of course, they destroyed the facilities last year, though. And now it might seem like Trump actually does have a legitimate personal grudge, though, where he really does think they're trying to kill him and he's got a temper, and that's why we're getting deeper and deeper into this.
You're right, though. He said they obliterated the nuclear whatever. And then again, it doesn't seem to be a clear purpose. I mean, in my view, the notion that there exists a regime that can hold the economic world hostage by closing off the Strait of Hormuz and saying we're going to charge tolls, that seems like a more reasonable justification for military action. Maybe not bombing the whole country, but like if you could get a coalition of the willing, Ken, to say, hey, any Iranian ship in the Strait of Hormuz that threatens merchant marines or oil vessels or whatever, we're going to stop you from doing that. And it's going to be the United States and all these other European countries that have interests in free-flowing trade there. That at least makes some sense, but it just seems so schizophrenic, the policy over there as to whether it's nuclear or closing off the strait. And then Scott Bessent says the Strait of Hormuz is going to be made obsolete by do we have Elon Musk boring tunnels underneath the Strait of Hormuz to transport oil? I don't know.
No, well, keep in mind, closing the strait was a response to killing their Ayatollah and everything. So it's not like they just did that maliciously out of thin air. Yeah, I read people way smarter than me on this. When you talk about the strait will be obsolete, it's my understanding that like shipping companies and things like that are starting to make new routes that'll take years to fully establish and develop. But yeah, Iran probably doesn't want to close it forever, or the economy will adapt and move away, and the strait won't matter as much. So Iran does have an interest to open it up to keep, things as they are. But I don't think they want to do that until they have more assurances that they're not going to get attacked anymore.
And back to what you were saying about this apparent retreat of the Trump administration, I agree with you that he was very effective at the beginning of his first term. And, when COVID first came about, he said, hey, this is the flu, go back to work. And I was like, all right, that makes sense. Let's do that. And then I remember the day very clearly. There was a big picture, I think, on the New York Post of him wearing a mask with the presidential seal on it. And I was like, look at that. He's muzzled. And, not to keep harping on Joe Kent, but you brought him up, I think, with good reason. I saw him, who was he talking to? Maybe it was Jimmy Dore or somebody like that, where they asked him flat out, doesn't it seem like maybe somebody got to Trump and said, hey, we're going to Butler PA you if you keep up with all this Doge and all this, shutting down USAID, I agree, was a good move. That's a major funding conduit for a lot of this deep state activity. Is it possible that someone, again, I'm asking you questions you can't answer, but we should explore the possibility that somebody says, hey, listen, Trump, you might be 80, but Barron is 20, Kai is 20, Don Jr., Eric, all your grandchildren, we're going to torture them for the rest of their lives unless you play ball. Is that what we're seeing?
It's certainly plausible. And, with things like the Butler shooting and how he's not investigating it himself. And when you look at the timeline of events, he takes office, he's initially questioning it. But by May of 2025, he gets briefed by Dan Bongino, who had just been appointed as deputy director weeks before then. They tell him that Thomas Crooks acted alone. There's nothing to see here. And then he shuts up about it, and that is just highly suspicious. And we know that Trump's own people couldn't have even investigated it because it was so early in his administration. People were just, taking their seat in their offices. So it's very disturbing. I don't know what to make of it. We could kind of only speculate.
Yeah, and look, when we just think about Dan Bongino's return, his demeanor, I'm joking, but also kind of not really. I seem to have a very distinct memory of Dan Bongino when he was deputy FBI director, appearing on the news where he looked, when you say someone looks like they'd seen a ghost, he looked like that. And if somebody said, listen, Dan Bongino, behind door number one, we have you in the most miserable, forget about being killed. How about being prosecuted for the next 20 years, going to jail, everybody in your family having something terrible happen to them? And behind door number two, you go back to podcasting. You're going to have sponsors. You're going to have syndicated radio shows. You're going to make millions of dollars. It seems like a method that would get maybe 9 out of 10 people or 99 out of 100 to fall in line, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I think you're referring to him and Cash Patel being interviewed by Maria Bartiromo. He just goes, talking about Epstein. He killed himself. Trust me. Like, why would we lie? It's like, well, we could think of a whole number of reasons why you would lie. Uh, and he does have some skeletons in his closet. His brother was involved in the Columbia Secret Service prostitution scandal, which we never really got to the bottom of. Judicial Watch actually has an outstanding lawsuit for records on that case. And if it's not just, I've had, when I post about this poking at Bongino's brother, a lot of people will be like, oh, so what? It's just prostitutes. These are prostitutes linked to the cartels, like, and this is the Secret Service.
Yeah.
This is where you compromise agents. I mean, agents killed themselves over that because they got fired, they lose their pension, their wife divorces them, and they fall into a spot like this ruined people's lives. So it's not just, some businessman going on a trip and messing around. This is like serious national security issues directly tied to Bongino.
Hmm. They love tying people up with prostitutes, don't they?
Classic honeypot. Yeah, yeah. There's also a picture of Bongino, and I don't know the significance of this. Everybody, if you're in politics, you take pictures with a lot of people, but there was some donor event, and I forget the Asian lady who was running like a happy ending massage place has a selfie with Bongino. It's somewhere on my Twitter timeline, but you know,
Unhappy ending for Dan
I don't
Bongino.
have any pictures with pimps or madams,
Oh
but
man, you better
Bongino
get on
does.
that.
So it's worth mentioning.
Boost the Instagram account. I mean, we're laughing, but it's not funny. I mean, yeah. So, right, this is your Substack post about this here. People should definitely follow you on Substack. We're going to be heading over there in a little while for the sponsor exclusive segment. People are going to be able to watch on substack.com/at Ken Silva. You can read one of Ken's latest articles here. It looks like Trump restarted the war with Iran over a phony assassination threat. Israel Psyops, Trump again. And I mean, look, I'm not doubting that Israel is involved. I just frequently wonder to what extent, where is it that the United States deep state ends and the Israeli deep state begins? They appear to be one and the same. In fact, the CIA and Israel were formed within 1 year of each other. I personally believe by the same entities, the sort of hidden hand behind this power structure, and they like to pit one side against the other, whatever it is. Black Lives Matter versus white nationalists, Israel versus Gaza, all of these things. It's a polarization. It's Saul Alinsky tactics, isn't it? Personalized, polarized, anything to do with religion, race, these sort of like almost like instinctual, things that really drive people at each other's throats. And then when all of us are warring in the streets, these overlords just come in and sweep up the mess, change the currency, and continue to control everything for the next 100 years.
And I think it's just accelerating like the last 20 years or so. I think I was on another show talking about this recently about, when I was growing up as a teenager in the 2000s, it seemed like there was a lot more of a united populace where we were opposing the Iraq War, the Patriot Act, this mass surveillance, the rising police state. And then something changed around the early 2010s after Occupy Wall Street, and now it's more of a, you hate your neighbor over certain things, and I'm not sure exactly what changed, but it's not good for the country.
I would have to say it began on 9/11. I mean, that was for many generations. I mean, you had in 2001, you still had people who were alive and arguably not even that old. Maybe they were young kids when World War II ended, and now they were, elderly or older adults. And so it was almost like, boom, there's the population psychological reset. I mean, that was such a traumatic event. Maybe more so for me. I mean, I think about it, I can still smell the air, the burning concrete, the chemicals, the death that you could smell in the air on that day. It really had a gripping effect. And here we are coming up on 25 years since then. Friends of mine now have adult children who weren't even born in 2001. 9/11 to them is a distant memory in the way that World War II would be to you or I, something that we read about in history books, but it's certainly shaped society. Ken, we're going to be right back. People can join us on subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and on substack.com/@Ken Silva. If you haven't already gotten it, don't forget, it's a great time to purchase Ken's book, The Trump Assassination Plots, What the Investigations Missed and Why It Matters. We've got a lot